Hey kittens and toms and everyone else out there. Tonight should be an epic chat about everything to do with COVID dating and lockdown dating and anxiety and just everything to do with what's going on at the moment and how it's going to affect love lives and dating and just sex in general. Just need to find the hero of Emma Kenny. 1 minute. Let me see if there she is. She's on time. That's what she's like. Like, she's just a professional. Any minute now.
Hi.
I said you're always on time. You're just like
Always.
a professional person.
How you doing,
I'm all right. I'm all right. Over it now. Over it. Like,
We've been
you,
over it since week 2.
I was about to say you and me spoke.
we were never in it.
No, we're not. We're not in this. We're not feeling it. Thanks for joining us because you've literally been doing your meditation or therapy session
I
at
did,
9
yeah, I did it most nights for about 3 months and then started going down to 3 times a week now. But yeah, anything to just kind of get people through. It's been crazy. It's just been so weird. I've just been living somewhere between, am I in one of the Twilight Zone episodes, or is this a coma? I didn't know where I was. I know it's one of them, but I've still not figured it out. But it's just,
It's like, I'm more zombie film, like going out and like everyone, and it's just sort of the energy
yeah,
just feels weird, and the whole human interactions just weird, and you never know whether someone's going to like breathe fire on you or try and eat you, or yeah, it's basically what's going on in my.
and I was like, well, I've had COVID and I've got my antibodies and I've got my certificate and I didn't even know. So back to normal then for me. But you know, bizarre times.
Yeah, well, we've been sent. I've got loads and loads of questions from people that have sent them in, like more questions than any talk we've ever done. So I think the whole everyone coming out of a lockdown, there's so many different dynamics, and we've got couples watching this. We've got couples who have been in lockdown together. There's couples that long distance couples. There's singles that have been crawling walls on their
Yeah,
own.
yeah, crazy.
You've got the extroverts and like the really high sexualized people who've been locked up on their own, coming out now, going, "We're out." Um, um, so a huge one is out is just anxiety in general. There is this, and I've noticed that like the past few weeks, everyone seems to be really anxious, and everyone's highly emotional, and
Mm.
people have asked, how do you know whether that anxiety is real, as in to do with your relationship, or whether it's just that's the zombie energy world we're living in at the moment?
Obviously it's subjective because everybody goes through different kind of issues. So relationship wise, some people might be having genuine problems because it's been really hard. But on a more clinical level, the prefrontal cortex is the area of the brain that's really important for things like rationalization and being able to have conversation and connect and basically deal with the bigger issues and wider issues in life. It kind of helps us to make things have sense to it. That area of the brain has been really badly affected, and it gets really badly affected by stress. And stress is meant to be momentary. It's meant to be when you and I are walking together to do our podcast and a car comes fast towards us, and basically your higher area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, just shuts down and lets your instinct take over. So you and me end up feeling really anxious by the side of the road, but we've got out of the way of the car. We weren't really interested at that point in looking at the car and going, what kind of car was it? And because you'd be dead, right? So the prefrontal cortex shuts down. This other area of the brain, the amphibian brain or the primordial brain, the big instinct area, takes over, and essentially it's meant to be like that. But you've had 3 months of it. So you've had 3 months of the area of the brain that helps you rationalize, make sense of the world, have grown relationships with people, converse, kind of make sense of all the most important areas of your world in the modern day. It's just been massively affected. So you are going to feel more anxious because the amygdala, that area of instinct, is taken over. It's been the thing that's been driving you. So Part of it is you are dealing genuinely with clinical impact. So this isn't just something that makes people not be able to cope. This is fundamentally probably one of the most important times when you think about research in the next 12 to 18 months beginning, because we need to know how damaged have we become. And I think there's been a massive misunderstanding out there about why we feel so pissed off. Like, people are angrier than ever, and it's really easy when you feel angry. You say to yourself, okay, how do I deal with this anger? What do I need to do? And usually we do a very clear thing. We project. We say to ourselves, I don't like feeling it internally. Who can I blame? Who can I row with? Who can I aggress? If you're on your own, you might go on Twitter. If you're with a partner, you might shout at them. If you're, you know, in a relationship with your kids, you might feel more fraught. So we've not been given that information. What blows my mind at the moment, Emma, we've done a hell of a lot of sending out information about how scared we should all be. We've sent out lots of information about, you know, what we essentially should and shouldn't be doing, even though it's conflicting. But what we haven't done is we haven't told people why they feel this terrible, and that it's okay, and that they're normal, and they're not going crazy, and they're going to be anxious. And it's not just about the fact that they're dealing with this unknown fear. It's that clinically their brain has been very, very harshly affected. So it's both of those things that you said. But I think if you're feeling those extremes, such as, I actually want to kill my partner and bury them outside, that isn't actually anything really to do with your partner on the whole. It's an escalation of that really uncomfortable instinct area, just saying, we have to go somewhere, we have to run, we have to do something big and bold to get away from this feeling. So it's all of that stuff.
That fight or flight.
It's, yeah, but we're kind of stuck on
And you
flight,
can't fly.
right.
Can't you?
And that's exactly it. So that example that you just gave there is a perfect example. Imagine if that is your necessary coping strategy. You're kind of somebody who goes, come on then, let's get this sorted. You can't. So where does all that adrenaline and cortisol go? It goes into your relationships, into your wider world, into your eating, into your drinking, all of those things. So it's a powerful, powerful experience that we're having at the moment. And certainly as a professional and a practitioner who works in relationships all the time, I feel that. And if I feel it, and that's not because I'm, by the way, that squeal wasn't me. I'm surrounded by animals. I have a plethora of animals with me.
Have you got your squirrel? Have you got your squirrel?
Squirrels in the squirrel run, but I have lots of different dogs. It's a strange place, my world. But yeah, so all of that is going on at the moment. It's affecting everybody in every way.
And on because, you know, communicating in relationships is hard enough anyway. And people always ask, even, you know, out of lockdown, out of COVID, one of the big questions that, you know, we get asked, and you've been asked when we've been on panels before and stuff, is tips on communicating, on, you know, especially, you know, a lot of time, you know, it's women are getting more open and being able to, so it's both sexes, all sexes even, because there's about 3,000 of them now, aren't there, of how the tips of just being able to communicate, and whether that's communicating the anxiety you're feeling,
yeah,
which you can't really explain, or whether that's communicating, well, I've been thinking about doing this position, or trying this kinky thing, or going to a KK virtual house party. You know, how, yeah, what's your advice on that?
I mean, I think the thing about communication is, and one of the things that I always think that I'm guilty of, is that I'm a really good communicator, you're a really good communicator. So unless you realise that a lot of people aren't as good as you at communicating, they're good at and better at other things, we often apply an expectation to people, even our partners, that they should know what to say and how to express themselves. But if you're somebody who's quite fluid in that way, actually that's just a gift you've got, and you should kind of acknowledge that and recognize that you shouldn't have an expectation of everybody else around you to have that gift too. And therefore, if you're an amazing communicator and your partner isn't a great communicator, it's how you can help them communicate in a way that's firstly comfortable and secondly builds confidence. Now, as I said, I'm the first person to take my own medicine when it comes down to communication, and I'm a really great communicator, but my expectation is often that I'll make my partner have to communicate as well without necessarily understanding the world that he inhabits, etc. So I think that the most powerful thing is to try not to use any blame tactics when you start exploring anything. So the classic thing we do in any kind of relationship work with communication is stop saying, you make me. And I do this, you know, I with my husband will do this at times. Like if I'm in a blame mood, I'll be like, when you do this, I feel that. Or when you don't do this, I don't feel like I'm validated, and so on and so forth. So trying to get people to start saying, I feel is the most important thing. So I feel like we need to spice up our sex life because I feel that I'm not exploring myself in a way that's giving me the best benefit. When you say that, you instantly are not projecting onto your partner. They're not feeling and hearing it in a, you don't turn me on anymore. You're not making this work for me. Go and learn some more things and come back when you've learned them. It's better to approach it in that way. So I think, first of all, know that you're going to be embarrassed if you've never talked about kink stuff, you've never talked about exploration. Even people who sign up to things like KK, often it's more of a voyeuristic perspective. It's like, I don't really know whether I want to go any further, but I kind of want to see what happens and learn about things. I want to be online and see what other people are talking about. And that's really important, because I think testing your own personal boundaries is where you need to be with a fantasy before you start bringing it up. Because sometimes we have a fantasy that's amazing, but then when we voice it, it doesn't mean that we necessarily want to go through with it. So again, check out your boundaries about, do you really feel that this is interesting, or are you just enjoying the titillation of exploration? And then at the point where you're like, well, actually, you know what? I would like to try a bit of whipping. You know, I would like to do that. I want to be spanked during sex. It can be really intimidating. And I think for guys, it's even more intimidating than for women. Women are brought up stereotypically as nurturers. So often we have this instinctive desire and drive to please, and that isn't always a good thing. But that will mean that if our partner sometimes says, oh, I'd like to try something, we can put ourselves in a challenging position, but often we'll try to negotiate that and navigate it either as a clear no, or hopefully some kind of, okay, let's give that a go. Guys, in my experience, struggle because they don't want to appear violent or aggressive when they're thinking about a lot of kinks. So I think that it's about know your own boundary, know whether you just want to discuss it as a titillating, voyeuristic kind of experience, but if you want to take it that step forward, make sure that you've really analysed it within yourself to feel that you can, and then understand it's going to be embarrassing and a bit risky and a bit weird to have that conversation, first of all, but to do it anyway, because the thing about fear is that's how you build courage and that's how you build confidence. You don't get anything without that. And once you've started to have that conversation, the brilliant thing is that boundaries are just limitations that you create with actual very little meaning behind them. You know, when you start saying, actually, there's nothing embarrassing about talking about my kinks and my, you know, kind of ideas about what would make our sex life better, because the reality is that it's your sex life. And if you can get naked and have somebody insert things into you, then you should definitely feel okay saying, we'll insert this machinery or dress in that whilst we're doing that, because it's the most vulnerable and intimate you're going to be, and sex should be adult play. And that doesn't mean we don't have lots of times in our lives where we don't have that much time to address all of those things I've just said, but it should be an evolving circumstance, and sexual communication has to begin by feeling the weirdness and just seeing it through.
Being vulnerable, isn't it? As soon as you're vulnerable, once you are, then I was saying the other day, it should be like, you know how you go, well, do you know what? I've read about this diet. I'm going to give this diet a go. You have to eat this, and then you do this, and then I've just seen this exercise program. It's really weird. It's only it takes 10 minutes, but we're able to say that and communicate it and tell people, oh, I want to try this, you know, nutrition plan. I want to try this new exercise, you know, class. So why is it then weird when you go, well, I quite like this position, or the, you know what I mean? It's like it's just another kind of something we'd quite like to do.
I think that one of the big problems is, like, you know, whether we think we're moving on a great deal in the modern day, and obviously feminism is far more prevalent, and the fact that women can own their own bodies in a way that they haven't necessarily had the power to do, you know, 50 years ago before. But I still think that there is this stereotypical thing where women are brought up with an idea of performance, and it's all about pleasing, and we are growing out of that to some degree. But as we grow out of that, the porn industry grows us into it further. And I'm not against the porn industry under any circumstances. I am not happy with certain elements of how women are dealt with in that situation. I think it's not great for men getting hard-ons in the future, if I'm really honest. But when I bring it back down to why we struggle with it, because there's still a lot of taboos. We even have the word taboo associated with sex. Like the last taboo you'll often hear. I mean, for God's sake, there are some much bigger taboos, rightfully so, than sex. I mean, we shouldn't even have that in the category. It's why we're here. So I guess the fact that we've always dealt with it around that shroud of shame, we've always used it as a loaded weapon. So stud or slag or whatever else that the words are associated with, when there is a loaded intent between an experience and the people experiencing it, it's going to become confusing. And so I think that until we unravel it and make sex just part and parcel of everyday language, and we have a problem there, because what happens as soon as you start saying that is, and again, I hear it and I know it and I understand it, people start thinking, what are you saying? Are you saying we start telling children about sex? And you're like, yes, I'm not just saying it, I'm advocating it, I'm living it, because I don't want my girls and boys to feel embarrassed or ashamed. I don't want people to feel that there is something unbelievably magical and spiritual and powerful about sex. If that's your bag, that's great. Either way, I don't mind if it's something that you just think is completely carnal and animalistic. If that's your way, that's fine. But you have to find a way of expressing it with your partner so that you're both fulfilled. And you can't do that until you get past those initial hurdles of shame. And it is shame. It's about, I'm embarrassed to ask the fact that you want to do this to me or that to me. I'm embarrassed to come around with my sex bag. I mean, literally every woman and man at some point in early adolescence should start being informed about how to collect the different machinery to make their life good.
Starting it really young. I mean, well, we were in the car the other day. It's like, well, it's just 1-year-old girl, 3-year-old girl, 5-year-old boy, and the 3-year-old and 5-year-old messing around, and Lily was like, I'm going to punch you in your willy, Raph, to the 5-year-old. And Raph turned back round and said, I'm going to hit you in the vagina. And James, like my husband, went, did that come to you? I went, Raph asked me what Lily's willy was called. I just said vagina because I didn't want to give it a stupid name, and it's a vagina. So now it's like, Raph, I'm just waiting for term to start next term when he goes back to school and I get called in because he's...
It's ridiculous that that is where it all begins. It all begins in people having this idea that sex can be very abusive. We all know this, but that's not sex. That's a predatory human being. So we've got to differentiate between sex and predators. It's completely different. It's the same as I can invite you into my house and I can invite somebody else and they'll burgle me. It's not my house that's the issue. It's the burglar that's the issue. Yeah. So let's name it as it is. Sex is not the issue. It's predators and they need to be dealt with. So we shouldn't apply that idea that by educating and informing young people and onwards, that somehow we're creating people who are deviant. And actually, that's what we're saying. We're saying that the more we discuss sex, the more we talk about communication, the more we introduce the idea that, teenagers have sex, the more somehow we incite it. And the evidence is that in the UK, our teenage pregnancies are way down on what they've ever been. We talk about sex more often, and that's because the more you know, the more informed you are. The more informed you are, the more ready you are to make choices that are right for you. And I think that as adults, particularly for people over 30, definitely for people over 40, you were brought up being told things like masturbation would make you unwell, that if you had a period, it was best to be very quiet about it and not to kind of inform anybody because it's very embarrassing. Those themes and schemas are why you kind of get people who have really unsatisfactory sex lives and then either leave a relationship at 40 because they want to go and actually rediscover who they are sexually and they can't because they've limited themselves with a partner and blame the relationship, not their own communication style. Or you get people dying who've never had orgasms properly in relationships, with particular reference to females. So that's something that has to be psychological, not physical. And it's something that can be challenged through communication, as you're saying.
And just going, because I've really got loads of these lockdown questions, so we could talk for hours on other stuff. One big one is the balancing, because obviously balancing working from home, and now that's that's part of what makes a good relationship is you're able to get away, you have some time out, you can compartmentalize, you work in the office, you come home, you switch off. And there's a lot of couples out there now who have lived on top of each other, both working from home. There's no end in sight, or maybe one's redundant, or it's what's your advice on, and they might have kids. We had loads of people asking those questions of how can you sort of, in the monotony of what's going on, have some spark, keep the romance alive.
Yeah, I think that one of the most challenging things is that all the things that you just demonstrated there are real for people. So, it is exhausting. And if you've got childcare going on and you're trying to do a job, you are frazzled. But one of the most important things is to reframe your family as a team. You're all playing for the same team. And every single part of that team has got certain things that they're better at than others within that team framework. And we often get confused about how to delegate in a family. We think that it has to be equal tasks for everybody. but actually some people are far better at certain things than others. So you should look at what your strengths are and how to play to them. That's really important. Secondly, you should always look at selecting at least 10 to 15 minutes in the evening where you can sit down, whether that's over a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, and just kind of express what's worked, what hasn't, what needs to recalibrate, what needs to be adjusted, and also like, how do you feel? Because what tends to happen in relationships, particularly around when you're in the same home, is everybody thinks their job is super important. We all do that. You know, my life is the one I'm directing. So even if I'm procrastinating, I might think that my procrastination is more important than my husband's procrastination, and therefore I should get more time for it, right? So it's the way you adjust your own vision. And it's really powerful when you start resenting your partner because you think that they're not pulling their weight and they're not doing it in the way that you think they should be doing it. So that adjusting and recalibrating and sitting down and having that conversation every evening and asking each other, what could I do that could help this situation? So again, in communication styles, escalation and conflict relationships come from a position of blame. When you blame someone, the natural state of an animal is to defend itself. It's just the way that we do it. We either get angry or we withdraw. So we don't resolve anything. So by sitting down and asking that question, okay, how do you feel? And what can I do better? It instantly means that together you're working in the same way and you're asking the same questions of each other. And then you start again, you have that communication and you keep working on it that way. When it comes down to the natural scenario of having kids at home, you also have to do the pick your battles. So if you've got teenagers and the reality is that they need to be home educated and they have been for a while, if you can't do it, acknowledge and be accepting of that. Don't then push yourself to do that and resent your partner because it's not working. Just figure out what battles are worth winning and which ones are letting slide. And then on top of that, I would definitely explore doing some kind of weekend amnesty. Feelings amnesty is where you just sit down with your partner and you kind of go, this is what I'm hoarding. It's what we do. We hoard those feelings of bitterness. It's what you do once a week as opposed to every single night, because the hoarding experience tends to fade as the week goes on. So on a Monday, you might be hoarding the fact that you feel that he or she spent too much time on social media when you were busy bathing babies, right? That would be a hoarding thing. But by Friday, that doesn't feel the same because that person's done 6 or 7 things that actually really helped you. So by the Sunday, when you sit down to that feelings amnesty, it's not the hoarding bit that you're carrying. It's that actually it was just the point where you said that you didn't enjoy the spaghetti bolognese that kind of hurt me. You kind of look at the things that still have meaning. So that can be really helpful. And then the final thing that I'd say is reframing, because no one's, God, I wish that I did know who'd created this idea of a pandemic and this whole thing, because I'd want to go and have a good stern word with them about this being a very difficult time for all of us. But it's doing that. It's kind of going, like, no one knows how to deal with this. Nobody at home is trying to do a bad job on the whole. Everybody is usually trying their best. It just might not be you're good enough. So just cut some slack where your relationship's concerned. Know that we often project, as everybody knows, into our safe places because we know that we can be badly behaved and still get away with it. So also just explore how you can kind of be peaceful. I really believe that. And there's been moments in my own experience where even for me, and I don't mean even for me as in, oh my God, I'm this expert. I don't mean that. I'm completely human. I'm very fallible, as you know. But what I have noticed is I'm very open to kind of exploring how I am impacted on emotionally. And usually I'm really stable. And I've been so pissed off in the past few weeks. And I know that if that's how I'm feeling, it's not about my partner. He's exactly the same. It's about, I have no control. You know, I can't control these things. And we all want to seek control. And in our physical relationships and in our social relationships and our personal relationships, we haven't had it very much. So I guess as well, just kind of acknowledge that it's been hard and recognize it will pass. And also know that we're adjusting to this weird as hell new landscape. And it's scary. And even if you are the biggest, strongest, most resilient human being in the world, you would be strange if you weren't impacted on. So just know that that's part of it.
Do you think that a lot, you know, because as I said, you know, in the last few weeks, a lot of people seem to be much more rummy and emotional, and people, you know, I speak to friends and they're like, it's just hit them, really, July, end of June, July. And it's like, for me, I am a people person. I need human interaction. And I don't mean, I'm so over this.
Physical.
I need physical. And that I know has massively affected me, that I can't do that. And I've met up with friends and my thing is just to throw my arms around them. And it's that. And we've spoken before about how important that physical contact is.
God,
in
yeah.
life generally. And do you think losing that kind of natural intimacy that just makes us human beings, makes us animals,
Totally.
do you think that's going to have long-term issues? Do you think it's gonna stop happening? Well, I hope so, because I want the KK parties to start happening again. So I've got October in my head. I'm being optimist.
I
So
mean, God, I mean, if somebody wants to try to stop us having that kind of physical contact, they're going to have to screw with hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. I mean, if you want to think about our natural cousin, it's the primate, which is a chimpanzee and bonobo, for example, 98.8% related to us. So 98.8%, you know, those guys literally have sex and groom each other all day. That's all they do, apart from eat and kind of connecting that social experience, and everything's about physical touch. It wouldn't matter if the government mandated that we were never allowed to touch each other. They'd be screwed, because our primal instinct is we either are socialized or we die. So when we talk about physical interaction, as in face-to-face and physical touch, we're not talking about it being something we enjoy doing because it's cultural. We're talking about, without that physical contact, you die. So we did studies, they're massive, they're consistently proven. The worst thing for our physical health is not having social interaction. And it can be on two levels. Close bonds are really powerful and important. So the people that you love, like you're with your family, so you're in a better place than somebody who's on their own in a flat. But the other thing is social interactions of momentary bases. Going to the shop, meeting a friend for coffee, shaking somebody's hand. They don't just give you a sense of connection, they save your life. So in studies, it is more important than what you eat and drink. Now, if you think about all the work we do around getting people to try and be fit and healthy, what usurps that is physical connection. So I don't think for 1 minute that this will be something continued in the long term, because we will refuse to do it. I would refuse to do it. When I'm asked on the radio and on TV how I feel about people breaking lockdown to go to illegal raves, I say, don't blame them for being more normal than you. That's what I
yeah,
say.
I said that
Don't
about
blame them.
the Bournemouth, the Bournemouth
Don't blame
Beasties. I
them
was
for
like,
being normal. They're
yeah,
normal human animals who haven't believed in this stuff in the way that you have.
yeah,
You've been more controlled, I've been more controlled, but don't blame them for being human animals.
yeah,
Think yourself that you're a bit odd, that you've chosen to go outside of that. And if people don't like to hear that, that's fine. It's not going to change a fact. A fact is a fact, and we are a human animal. In fact, it's bizarre to me that statistically we get sicker. We get sicker and sicker and sicker. And the reason that we can look at that and go, well, what's this then? Oh, it's the lack of social interactions, because we have evidence for it. The more isolated you are as an old person, the more sick you get. The more isolated you are as a human being, the more depressed you get. And recently, and as you'll see now, a massive spate of people trying to take their own lives. Of course, it's the most normal thing in the world to do when you feel that you have no connection and meaning. So I would personally think that when it came down to it, much like, and rightfully so, Black Lives Matter and the whole BAME community and the white community coming together when those awful things were happening and are happening and consistently happen, you know, people just say, screw you, I'm going out and I'm going to riot and I'm going to make sure that the government listens. So I don't think you have to worry at all. I think what you said, just even though I'm going on with myself, you did make a really important point about people's emotions at this moment in time. And I think you're absolutely right. And again, I relate to that as a mother, as a professional, as a partner. I think it's because what we've all done is we've all spent the last 3 or 4 months going, it's not really happening. Don't need to really worry about this. Nothing's going to change. It'll be fine. We'll get locked down. It'll be like, Jacinta over in, New Zealand. It'll be fine. We don't have to worry. And then suddenly we started to come out of our houses and it's shifted. People are being different and distant. People look angry if you're not wearing a mask at some places. People have weird systems in shops, and it doesn't matter how protective that is. If you haven't been exposed to it, the world feels like it's shifted a lot. And if you go on the high street like I did today, I'm in Manchester city centre where my offices used to be, and I'm looking at this ghost town, and that's very affronting psychologically because it blows your mind that this is not the way that life has been. But it's definitely a blip in the road. It really is. It will all come back because we're instinctually programmed for that.
And on that and the emotions, anxiety, and you've kind of covered it a bit, but the whole kind of sex drive. A lot of people, people go either one way or the other. They either go in stress, their sex drives go through the roof, and they need that, intimacy and that, fulfillment, or your sex drive just goes down the tube, and that's it.
Definitely.
So advice on that. If we've had a few people that have said about, theirs have been stressed and jobs and they literally have zero going on and they don't know how to relight it, get back in the game when nothing's really changing.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
yeah.
the first thing for me is that it's not the sex that's the problem, it's the sex that you're having that's the problem, or you've got something bigger going on. And I say that because I think that, we all kind of take a lot of blame when we're not feeling that switched on or turned on, and we don't feel like we're really into the idea of it. But sometimes it can be something a bit deeper, and everybody should always, if you've had a persistent experience of libido shift, you should get yourself checked out of the doctors, because there are so many little things physically that can make a massive difference to your sex drive. So don't just automatically say, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken, or my relationship's broken. Because honestly, the amount of clients that I've had, and then they've got tested and the hormones are out of place, or they've got really low iron, and all of these things contribute to the way that we feel about our bodies. So the second thing I'd do is check out what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're doing with your body. If you don't like yourself, if you don't love the way that you are, the form that you're in, then you're going to find it really difficult to relax fully and lovingly with a partner, or, become the kinky sex god that you secretly want to be, because you're just not feeling good about yourself. So are there things that you can do about your wider life, like look at a healthier diet, look at not drinking quite as much alcohol, she says, with a large glass of red in front of her. Are there things that you can do? Can you exercise a bit more? Because we know that they have a clinical impact. We know that that creates a different kind of way of feeling, both about the physical but also the mental. So I'd explore that. But then when it comes down to your relationship, a lot of the time it's because either you feel overwhelmed with the idea of performance, which means that you think that you've got to kind of be long and drawn out, whereas actually you should reframe that and say, well, if I've only got a 5-minute quickie before bed, that means that you get into the habit. Yeah, it's what I preach all the time, if you've better to have sex every day, even for a short period of time, just get it done, to get back in the habit and to not feel overwhelmed, and to relight that connection and intimacy. And then when it comes down to the bigger picture, I guess, like, you know what I'm like, I'm a big believer in expressing fantasy. I think that women more than men are problematic in this area. I think that women have got the most wild imaginations and the most vivid ideas, but the idea of actually saying it and speaking it, they kind of get stuck because they feel that they're going to be embarrassed, or they're going to have to tell their partner that maybe they've been faking orgasms for 15 years. And I've worked with so many women who've done that. And guys sometimes as well, when they're exhausted, they might not want to have to go through the whole getting to orgasm. But if you're not saying that, then you're not going to get off the mark. So I think communicating the fact that, you're exhausted, but that you want intimacy, can you just have quickies, is really good. I think getting people to sit down and go, well, what I really would like is this wild kind of sex, or this crazy kind of sex, or this kinky kind of sex, or just dressing up as something that's, interesting to me. Those things help. And then there's a thing called sensate focus that we use a lot in psychosexual work, which is basically where you use non-intimate massage, and it's a really lovely naked massage. And part of the reason that we introduced that is to say that firstly, there's no pressure on having sex, so it's not about you having sex. If it happens, that's okay, that's cool, but that's not the aim. The aim is to physically reconnect you with intimate touch and kissing, and just lots of that kind of really deep connection without that whole performance anxiety. And very often in loving relationships, you give each other less and less and less, not because you don't love each other, but because life gets so busy that you deprioritize your needs. Yeah. And in the end, you start buying into that narrative, and you think, well, I haven't had sex with him for 2 weeks because I wasn't really finding that attractive. And you buy into that narrative. Whereas if you deconstruct it and say, well, actually, no, I am tired and I've got these responsibilities. And actually what we need to do is kind of bring ourselves further together and work on ways that we can connect together, and then relight that intimacy. Sex is habitual. It really is. The longer you leave it, the more anxiety you get about it. And then you have it, enjoy it, but then because you've left it so long, you've got into that mindset where you're like, right, well, that's over now, I just won't bother right for a while again. It's about working hard. Like, sex is adult play. It's adult play, and it's the best one you'll ever have if you're getting it the way that's right for you. So definitely that would be what I'd look at doing, like exploring how you can bring it in a way that doesn't overwhelm either of you and definitely turns both of you on. So just to say as well, one of the things that I always say to you, and again in work couples, particularly couples who are of a certain age and haven't used anything like machinery, I think that masturbation is really helpful. because both of you can do it to yourselves in front of the
Yeah.
other, and you start bringing it in a way where it feels like you get to do it exactly as you like. They get to be involved in that experience exactly as they like. You're both satisfied, but neither of you feel that you've had to do the extra bit and bob that kind of gets to you and makes you feel overwhelmed. And of course, with respect, when you then start getting into the situation where you're staring into each other's eyes, I mean, it is a turn on, and then usually you'll find that other stuff happens, but it's about knowing those boundaries and also never just thinking about the big O. It doesn't have to be about the orgasm. It can just be about mutual pleasure and, you know, fantasy, definitely.
And the final, we are there. I know there's lots of singles listening, so we are going to. I'm coming on to singles, but a final, just lockdown couple one is that one where it's a long distance relationship, or it's a couple that haven't seen each other for months, and a few people have said how, because then there's obviously that anxiety of, do they still like me? We haven't been able to have that intimacy where you just have that connection and your mind starts going
Yeah.
crazy. And so you know, what are the, even though, you know, we are coming out of it now, so people are able to, but some people still can't, you know, do, if one of them sort of frontline working in the NHS or a care home, or, you know, you're not going to put yourself there, or living with an old mum. So yeah, on keeping a kind of virtual, long distance relationship
Oh, I mean,
happening.
God, if you haven't discovered video sex and phone sex, then my God, you need to start. I mean, literally, there is nothing more fun than sexting each other and, you know, giving each other phone calls. I mean, obviously, one of the things that I'd say is you have to make sure if you're doing any kind of sexting or any kind of video calls that you ultimately really trust the person that you're talking to. And I say that just because, unfortunately, revenge porn exists. It is illegal now, but we do still see people who, it's not even that the partner or the ex-partner is going to do something nasty to them. It's just the fact that they think they might is really upsetting for them. And, you know, most people don't, but it's the feeling that makes you feel unsafe. So it's always important to protect yourself. But I think that if you can get to that situation where, like I was saying, mutual masturbation online, where you're kind of like looking at each other and talking to each other, dirty talk is really fantastic. Exploring fantasy, I mean, my God, that's the thing about text that I think is fantastic. When I start working particularly with older couples, not necessarily younger couples who are more schooled in this area, older couples who've never done anything like phone sex and they've had vanilla sex, which has been fine, but they've not had sex for a long period of time because it's got boring and all of those things, texting is always where we start, because you can be so filthy without actually verbalizing it in a way that feels like you're bothered about how you sound. And dirty talk is not easy for everybody. It really isn't. I mean, I've worked with some of the most gorgeous people, and you'd think that if I looked like that, I'd just be out shooting my mouth off anywhere, because I'd just be like, look how fantastic I look, you know, look how I'm going to speak now because I'm just so sexual. But it just doesn't go like that. So helping people to start understanding that vocabulary can begin with words. So I would also say that if you've been distant from each other, anybody who writes letters increases intimacy much better than text and email. But when it comes down to sex, you should have used this as the biggest sense of foreplay that you've ever had. And hopefully that would give you a real deepening of intensity and bonds. And I guess that the most natural thing that people will feel is nerves. What I've found is that when people are away from each other, it doesn't even matter whether you've been married 20 years, you just get that nerves when you see them. And that's because you have meaning and they have meaning. So that kind of nervous energy and fear and a bit of like, you know, being coy, that's because you're in the mating game and it's meant to have that meaning. So kind of embrace it and be kind of
Yeah.
excited. But definitely for anybody who hasn't had phone sex and Zoom sex and any kind of sex on video, the reason I think that people should do it, as long as it's safe, is it just gives you a little bit of a safe edge because you're not physically with them, so you can explore it in a way that doesn't feel like you have to move through to the physical. And I think that that's something that everybody should try at least once
Yeah.
in their
And
lifetime.
actually that's something for the singles out there
Yes.
on their own, who in the dating game and are doing exactly that with people they might have just met. And but now and then also the thing now is that, you know, bars and everywhere's open. You can come out, you can meet face to face for dating in there. So what's your advice on that? Because dating scares the shit out of a lot of people. If you're an introvert and you suffer from anxiety, just going on a first date is nerve-wracking in itself. And now you've got all this distancing weirdness thrown in the mix as
Yeah.
well. So yeah, just advice for coming out now and getting back in that face-to-face dating game and knowing what, what anxiety is what.
I guess the first thing is that you've rationalised for months it's not safe to some degree. So people have been informed both on a vicarious trauma level that things haven't been safe. They may have built up lots of fears that are natural because your brain is giving you a reason to stay in, which is it mustn't be safe, let's not go out. So you spent a long time telling your brain to do what it's done, and now you're going, it's not, it's fine, go out. There's got to be a period of adjustment. So first of all, just accept that the one thing that will get you past it is just exposure. So the more you go out and do these things, the easier it will feel. That's just what we do with phobic work. That's the only way really past it. But the other thing that I would suggest is I think that by the time you meet for a coffee or for a glass of wine, you should have had a few phone calls and you should have had a few video calls, because there is something about that. Firstly, hearing somebody's voice. Listen, everybody knows the minute that somebody starts to speak, if you're not attracted to the way that they sound, the tone, the connection, it's going to be harder to make it work. So number one, I think you should have conversations, see what your rhythm is like communication wise, and then video calls, because if you're going to meet them somewhere, you want to know that that first hour that you kind of connect, you've got some kind of connection, something similar. And I would do that just so that you feel that you're not going to have to deal with that. Really don't want to see this person. How do I get away? You've kind of got past that. And then I guess when you've got low nerves, if your nerves are really kind of low and you're quite confident, just go about making them feel comfortable, because remember, the other half might not feel that comfortable. Use your wisdom and your kind of ability to just be present and in the room in a way that helps them. But if you're the one who's insecure, rehearse. I mean, I know that people think that there's something trite and staid about rehearsing, but we do it with people constantly. So if you look at TEDx speakers, those TEDx speakers have been through a year sometimes of going and practicing and learning their speech and having somebody help them who's actually specifically given that individual to work through so that they nail it. And that's how these great people sound great. So the only way you really get to that level is when you rehearse. And it's as simple as like, how do I look when I smile and look in somebody's eyes? Well, you've got a mirror. How do I sound when I'm asking them what they do for a living, and what questions would be open enough so that I don't have to worry about being center stage? Most people love somebody who listens to them. They just love that feeling that somebody's really engaged. So practice how it is with your body language, mirror them, do all those kind of things, because we know in psychology, if you're sitting like this and I'm sitting like this, I instantly have this connection. Or if I'm like this, obviously it's not probably going very well, but often people are quite comfortable like this and it gives a really bad message. So how do I mirror? How do I kind of look at the way that they breathe and mirror their breathing? And then on top of that, like, what questions are interesting enough that sound like I could get away with going, how do you do or feel about this? Let them go for it and then seem really interested. And at that point, you've already started building the fundamentals of rapport. And it's a powerful, powerful connector to do that. So don't ever feel that dating should be this spontaneous thing, because it's going to be a guy or a girl who just put the work in. And they're going to put the work in, and they're not going to just look fantastic. They're going to sound like they really have thought about who they are, and they're really interested in who you are. And that's really powerful.
And on that, because obviously, before there was a kind of, Tinder date, you have about 5 drinks and end up shagging without any. And there's now, and actually this goes to, because people have said the whole, obviously KK, there's a big play community, it's a big, it ranges, you've got, from open, poly, swinging, just play, just parties, and without anyone having to really think about that intimacy and the interaction, and it just happens. And that relaxed state is what makes it able to happen. And now suddenly the fear of God's been put in everyone. Yeah. So it's sort of people have asked, how do you get back in, that, do you think it's going to change the dynamic? Is it just sort of, are there kind of things that you can do to sort of get your brain back into kind of...
The one thing I would say, the way to get the brain back in is, look, I don't want to sound unsympathetic, because I understand how scared people have been. I don't want to sound unsympathetic because I know people have died. I know all these things, yeah? But I'm going to have to be really honest with you and say, you are human. You are around viruses and bacteria every single day of your life. Did you ever walk around thinking to yourself, I really can't snog that person or have sex with that individual or go on a threesome because they might have a virus? Listen, guys, you, when you have sex, are much more likely to come away with a virus that might do you a bit of damage unless you protect yourself. But how many times do we have sex without condoms? And don't lie, because most people have had lots of sex without condoms. And ironically, most of the time have got away with it unscathed, bizarrely.
And you're not thinking serious and stuff.
Right.
You just,
Exactly. Yeah. You are human. You are meant to be getting viruses. You're meant to inherit bacteria from the environment around you. That's why you look after your bodies. That's why you protect the host. The host is the issue, not the illness. So first of all, if you really are that worried about your health and wellness, now I'm going to put in the category, if you've got immunology issues or cancers or any of the things like diabetes type 2, there are things that make you afraid and you have to protect yourself with. But let's say diabetes type 2, then obviously we have a comorbidity with weight. What can we do to reduce your weight so that you don't feel as scared? You could do things to control your experience and control the way that you feel about your body. But Jesus Christ, the bigger question is, do you want to live or do you want to exist? Because personally, I'll take my chances if it means that I am vital and alive and passionate and free over don't come near me, I'm scared I might get sick one day. Because you know what, guys, it's even worse than that. You die, right? You die, I die. We are history. In the future, we are history. You know, these kind of sessions might be looked back on by aliens and historians in the future. But the one thing that you and I both know is we are toast. We're on our way. So why would you protect yourself to a degree where the very gift that you have, which is this breath of consciousness for this finite dot of time in this landscape of eternity, why would you waste a minute of that thinking that you can't shag somebody that you find really, really fit? Why would you do that? Because that, for me, that's purgatory. You know, that's purgatory. And I think that that self-talk is powerful when you start having that conversation with yourself. And I can't make people decide to go out and have fun. I can't make people make choices to be brave and just accept that we are fallible and that's okay. That's the beauty of humanity. We die. Without it, there's no power of worth in our existence. So you can either accept that and celebrate it, and in doing so, be fearless to a degree and accept your fragility as well, and that's okay. Or you can just do what we've done the last 4 months. And it's been shit.
Well, I've been saying it's you know, risk assessment 101, which is, you know, I've got my mind works business wise and stuff, and it's the only way I can see it. It's like you know, if we do events, if we do anything to do with business, it's that risk assessment, and you weigh out the risks and the probabilities and the chances, and you decide whether you're gonna do it. And the thing is, though, you know, as you said, there are people, and someone, you know, said there are people with very, you know, compromised immune systems with cancer, and they were compromised before COVID, and they're compromised from picking up viruses with or without COVID. It's compromised, and they have to be careful. And it's that, isn't it? It's just
it's how we protect. Yeah, and it's how, yeah. I mean, I think that a great society protects the most vulnerable. We don't do a great job of that in the UK, with respect. You know, we don't protect the vulnerable in the way that they deserve to be protected. Hence why so many people died in care homes. You know, that will hopefully be a travesty that gets explored and people will be held to account. But the idea that we stop society because people are unwell, no, we have to do better jobs at protecting people who need protection, and in a better way so that they are genuinely safe. But for the rest of us, God, what are we? We're human animals. This is what blows my mind. We're human animals. I mean, that's what happens. We get born. Sometimes we get sick. Sometimes we get really lucky. I was talking to a 103-year-old the other day. Really lucky, still married to the love of their life. Not had a problem. Blows my mind. And just the joy of having that connection. And of course, as well, speaking to people who are similar ages to that, who are telling me that they can't believe how people have been so scared by this when they lived through whatever, the Blitz, etc. And listening to people's stories really empowers me, because I'm like, I need that sometimes as well, because even somebody like myself who's like, I just want to get on with my life and still be respectful to people who don't want to, but I can't be quiet. about wanting to do that. And I'm not apologizing. I'm so tired of people wanting you to apologize because you dare to believe that it's okay to return to life as normal. They want me to say sorry and that I'm not looking after other people. I fully wish to look after anybody who needs looking after. It's what I've spent my life doing. But I'm bringing up boys, and I want them to be strong individuals who take the world by both hands and feel free. That's the thing about a democracy, isn't it? That we got lucky enough to be born here. So let's not screw that up for fear. Fear is always bigger than the fear itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always.
And someone asked about trusted communication. There only should be someone being dishonest about how careful they've been so far and giving me all the information. But to me, reading that and thinking about that was there before COVID. Is that trust of, especially if you're out there and it's open and it's whether it's coming to parties or play or polyamorous open relationships, or you're just out and you get shit faced and you pull someone, you take those risks.
Yeah, liars are always going to be a liar as well. A liar is always going to be a liar. A con artist will always be a con artist.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, really, that in life we always look at our worst experience and then apply it because it's a protective mechanism. But very often, we get into situations of immediate trust because somebody's good at making us trust them. We're not stupid. People who get hurt and harmed, they're not stupid people. They're not gullible. They're not, people making mistakes. It's just that people are good at lying. And so you can't, as you said, you can't absolutely and utterly protect yourself against that. What you can do is you can make choices yourself to protect yourself in a way that makes you feel psychologically well. But I would counter that if that means not having a life, that's not protective and it isn't mentally well. You have to think about the balance of what is safety. What was it before when I went out in the winter and could have got flu? And just to put that in context, I was in intensive care at 30 because I got a flu that was so serious, I nearly died. I signed my death benefits. That's how bad it was. I never, from that moment, when they told me I had scarring on my lungs and all those things, walked around feeling afraid. I felt lucky. I was like, man, I got a really bad strain of flu and I nearly died. And look at how amazing it is that I didn't, and all of those things. I don't apply that one time that something went wrong to the rest of my life. That's a really bad blueprint because my evidence is, up until that very day, I nailed it. I nailed it. And since that day, I've nailed it. So that's how you apply it. You apply the majority, not the minority.
Cool. Well, listen, I've just noticed it just coming up to 10 and they cut us off. Instagram are bastards and they cut us off at an hour. So just quickly, when did KK plan? Hang on, let me just answer this one quickly. Hang on. Plan to reopen parties. Do you know what? As soon as we can't do anything until social distancing stops. So how long is a piece of string? And in our head, I'd like to think September, because I'm an optimist. In our heads, we're laughing, the events team saying we bought our Halloween outfits because we're like putting the positive vibes out into the universe that we will be able to have Halloween parties. So that's the thing. We're just kind of going all big on the virtual event at the moment, which are going really well. Workshops and weekly parties. So that's all we can do. Yeah, at the moment.
As well, for your brand as well, it's like me. You have to apply the rules. You have to do it. Like, the fact that I would rather not wear a mask and so on and so forth, you don't have a choice because you've got to be seen to be doing the right thing as a brand. And for you, you've got to toe the line.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's just stupid, and we are the most intimate kind of event we could possibly have. So it would just be stupid. You can't do a halfway house either.
No.
And now just quickly, one last question. A few people asked, which has nothing to do with COVID and stuff, is recognizing if you're in a bad relationship or with a narcissist. Just to end on a good
one. So narcissism is the most overused word in relationships these days. If you are with a narcissist, a true narcissist, they will steal from you, they will con you, they will use you, they will discard you, they will have no consideration for your feelings. And when I say no consideration, I mean they will not even be able to connect with the fact that they harm or hurt you. You will literally be a tool and a strategy for them to use to get pleasure or to create pain. If, however, you're saying, I am with a selfish bastard who does not look after my own needs, then that's not a narcissist, that's just a selfish bastard who is not really self-aware. So when people use the word narcissism, you have to think about the extreme version of it, really. They can have some narcissistic tendencies, which means that they just seem to not give a crap about you and use you for their own pleasure. But unless they have all those other variables, which makes them, you know, a pretty dangerous kind of character, and somebody who ideally needs to kind of be protected from people, it's more likely that you are a vulnerable person. And when I say vulnerable, I don't mean there's anything wrong with you. I mean that you're somebody who's open and sensitive and loving and empathetic and forgiving. And that's the big one. When I meet people who think they're with a narcissist, often what I hear is they've got incredibly flexible boundaries. So their elastic boundaries mean that when they're treated badly, because they're such a lovely bloody human, instead of going, get out, screw you, get out, they're like, when the person goes sorry, they're like, oh, well, I've said sorry. Because they would never say sorry unless they meant it. So therefore they accept it. They see the world from their perspective, not the others. The most important thing to do is when you're in a relationship that might be going wrong, step into the shoes, look at how that person's treated you, and then imagine whether they would really address the responses in the way that you feel, that you believe they're addressing. So a sorry is only a sorry if it happens once. If it happens more than that, it's a flexible boundary issue. And you have to kind of stand up, recognise that you deserve more, and ideally kick them out with respect.
Yeah. That isn't it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Isn't it?
Yeah. And the sad thing is that for people who are that loving, it's their natural tendency to forgive. So they have the very thing that makes them an awesome, incredible, lovely human. You know, it's going to make them an incredible parent, incredible manager, used against them. Because love is always the Achilles heel. So it's about gaining confidence, growing in that way, and then creating those firm boundaries. I used to have flexible boundaries, and it was terrible for me. Now I have very fucking firm ones.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, my 20s and 30s were like, whoa,
Yeah.
I can't even see the end of the elastic band. It's just like out there.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't even know you had one because it was so long that you just kept going.
There was no boundaries. No. There was nothing. Cool. Do you know what? I know there were a few questions that didn't get answered, but we will have, Emma will be back on for sure in a few months' time when things are settled a bit, and we'll just have a full-on relationship chat. But I will see you soon.
Take
and
care, thank
you very much. And you too. See ya. Bye. She's epic. And I know there were a few questions that didn't get answered. I will try and put them into next Wednesdays. We've got a few people like Emma coming on, so I will put them on there. But Instagram cut us off any minute now. So we'll be back next week. I think it's a big body positivity one next Wednesday with Scotty on Famous. And see you guys soon. Bye. See ya.